Hi, Sue and Randy.
Hi, Mike and Andrea. Hello, welcome. I'm Sue Pinto here with the Third Option International, along again with Mike and Andrea Buckley. Randy will be back shortly. He will be monitoring our Facebook feed. So if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to send something. We'd love to hear from people this evening if you're watching along with us live. Mike and Andrea, it's good to see you again. Thank you again for joining us.
Great to see you too.
We're glad to be back again.
Well, it looks much brighter where you are. Although, however, I have to say, at least we did get some sunshine up here in New York. So thankfully, we had some time outside.
Great.
We are going to start with, first, before we get into tonight's topic, we just want to go back and just kind of review quickly last week's topic, which was, I have now forgotten, responsibility in the blame game. So we want to talk a little bit about that. And we talked about the two ends of the balance. One side is you have somebody who may be irresponsible. On the other side, you have somebody who might be overly responsible. So Mike and Andrea, what techniques, what processes did we talk about last week so that people can come to the third option, which is becoming self-responsible?
Well, responsibility in the blame game, as the title of that segment that we did, comes into play where, people are really struggling in how they communicate with each other. And there's a lot of finger pointing going back and forth. It's not my fault, it's your fault. And they're just the blaming and the shaming that goes on doesn't help the marriage. A lot of people say, well, I'm right and you're wrong. And we always ask the question, would I rather be right or would I rather be in a relationship? And how we get around that goes a long way towards improving our communication in marriage. When I look at responsibility, it's my response is my responsibility. We're trying to replace that accusing you, that finger coming up in somebody's face and say, you're the ones that's the problem. But the only way we really can effectively communicate is by using the responsible I. And by that, we mean I statements. I feel picked on. I feel discouraged. I feel very accused when you do that you thing to me. And when that happens, it takes people out of being together. It takes people out of that mutual agreeing to how we can fix the problem instead of blaming the person. And much of it is because we enable people to do things, they get used to it, and then the person that is used to having the other person do that for them, they like that person coming in to be the rescuer, someone that takes care of all the responsibilities. And we have a saying that says, do not do for others what they should and can do for themselves. And it's all about, again, that responsibility. So we're taking being an over-responsible person in a relationship, which happens quite a bit, to the person that's not being responsible whatsoever. That's her job. Let her do it. To being self-responsibility. Self-responsibility is the third option. And that's what we're all striving for. And when we find that, we can find that, and we take the responsibility for ourselves, then we know that we're going to do better in those areas.
Yeah, excellent. So Andrea concurs. Excellent.
I do. I couldn't say it any better than that.
Perfect. So then now we move into the next topic, topic 3. We've talked about topic 1, building a climate of respect, making sure that both partners are aware of the Bill of Rights, respecting the rights of the other person. Then we moved into topic 2, which you just reviewed for us nicely, responsibility in the blame game, becoming self-responsible. So now we go into 3, expectations. Tell us you know, what can you remind, or what can you talk about expectations? I mean, what does it exactly mean? How do we get these expectations?
Well, maybe it'd be a good idea to start with the definition, according to the third option program, what we say the definition of expectations is. And we list it as expectations are assumptions about what someone should do. Expectations are assumptions about what someone should do. So in that sentence and in that thought, there's two words that are really important: assumptions and should. So the first word, assumptions, we think most of the times through our own lens about, well, I'm assuming that because I think and believe a certain way, that probably Mike is going to understand that and believe similarly to what I believe. But we don't really stop to think about, well, why? Why do I really think that thought? Just because it's logical and it's my expectation about life or my expectation about my job, parenting, chores, whatever it is. I'm looking at it through my lens. But when we get involved with another person, another someone, we are assuming that it should be a certain way without really challenging it. And the should part of it is a really important part of the definition too, because many times when that comes across to the other person, it feels like it's imposed on them. So an expectation can be something that another person all of a sudden begins to feel resentful about, because they think that it is something that the other individual is imposing on them. Okay. We're going to go kind of along and talk a little bit more about it.
So we want to take a look at really where expectations come from. Many times when we got into marriage, I had in my mind what I thought it was about, and I know Andrea had in her mind what it was about. We really didn't talk about it. We really didn't go through the exercises of saying, what are the expectations that we have for our marriage?
No, we didn't identify it as that. We weren't, I don't know if you were taught that, but we weren't taught to sit down and say, well, these are my expectations. We had conversations, but not about a lot of issues.
Well, and I think that makes sense, because I think too, in the beginning of relationships, there's such this rose-colored glasses and everything's just wonderful. And, oh, look at how great we are together. And they must feel the same way as I do. And yeah, I think a lot of times people, as we've said before, they put that best foot forward because they want the relationship to continue along, right? So there's probably not talk about expectations. I think it's often just they assume, oh, well, I want to go to the party. I assume he also feels like going as well, or that sort of thing.
Yes.
True. And we learned all this from our parents, maybe at church, school, radio, TV, videos. We see what other people are doing out there. And then sometimes we might buy it and say, well, I think that's the way it should be for us too. That's not necessarily the case. And we're going to go into that more to find out really what expectations might look like if we discuss it further.
Well, I could share in our relationship one expectation I had. I had a dad who was extremely handy around the house. He could do everything. He was a machinist in his job during the day, but when he came home, he could paint. He built our house. He did the lawn. He knew about cars. He would go across the street and help my grandfather on any project that he had. So I came to the marriage when I met Mike with a expectation that, well, I don't know a whole lot about these things, but I'm sure Mike is going to know all about how to fix the faucet and how to, if we get locked out of the house, what we're going to do. And any of those things, I just relied on my dad for everything that was in that category that provided security. However,
that wasn't me.
I was looking
I
at
could do
Mike's
some
face.
things, but not with the expertise that her dad could. You know, he was a machinist. He worked with tools every day, and that's not what I was. So, and I had similar expectations about, well, when I come home from work, she's going to have dinner on the table at 5 o'clock, and she's going to have the same meals that my mother made. But you know, that didn't always work out that way. And those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Unless we discuss and put those together in our lives as to how we want to formulate our relationship, our marriages, and sometimes we're going to run into trouble thinking that, gee, doesn't everybody do it that way? No, they don't.
Another thing that we probably see either in a movie, we might get our expectations from a movie or a book or TV, that when the two of us came together, our social life was going to be very similar. We were going to like to do the same things. We were going to like to go and visit our family. We were going to go out dancing. We were going to go, I might have said that. Those were mine. And I don't know that Mike had all those same ideas and expectations. At the time, was a little more extroverted. Now I'm an introvert. But Mike was more introverted. Now he's become more extroverted. So that idea of how we socialize and when we're engaged in courting, you think about it one way, and sometimes you may not be being honest during that time period. So you're going along with what that person is to please them. But after the marriage, you start really getting into ooh, he wants to just stay home on the couch. And I didn't know that, I expected we were going to go out once a week. Or she,
Well, I expected to have 10 kids, didn't you? Really, right? So
that's another whole issue.
that is another whole issue. But those are the things that sometimes we don't really talk about. So it's one of those areas that unless we do talk about expectations, and each one has their own that they bring to the table, but if you never talk about them, when you finally do, sometimes it's not under the best circumstances to have that conversation. And that's where the trouble comes from.
Right. So, I mean, at the beginning, really, obviously, the best situation would be to discuss them early on in the relationship. I suppose probably after you sort of recognize that you want to stay together and starting to discuss those at that time. But yes, I mean, should we not go into relationships without having expectations? Or, once we get into the relationship and now we're further down the road and now we're kind of disappointed that, you ought to, he should have, she should have, or whatever, how do we get to the point? What are the two extremes that we're at here?
Well, I think a lot of this starts to come into play when you reside together. When the couple starts you're in the romance phase, and we're talking about that a little bit, the romance phase where you're first together, and you move in together, now you're in the same space together. So all the assumptions and all the ideas and thoughts that are in my head and all the ones that are in Mike's head start to play out. And that's where we come to the discussion about, okay, we've got to think about these expectations, because this is, I think, when disappointment starts to emerge. This is when the first fights start to happen. Well, you left those clothes over there, your shoes, I have 5 pair, I can't even get in the door. And, the little expectations start to become issues where, because the other person maybe doesn't know about it, doesn't know how deeply you think about having a clean house or how important it is to that person, it might not be to the other one. So it's a lot of those things. We list expectations or categorize them with uns. There's 4 uns, and you probably don't have that visual, but if people are listening, I'll go slowly. The first one is unconscious. It's being unaware of expectations or the source of the expectation. The second is unrealistic. You know, they may just be a myth for us or our spouse. You know, how realistic is this thought, this expectation that we have? The third one is unspoken. If we have never told our spouse what we expect, yet we find ourselves disappointed to the point of being angry because we have this expectation and it's not met. Oftentimes, I think this one for me and for a lot of people is because we assume that spouse should know how we feel. If it's not spoken, if it's unspoken, how are they going to know that? So that's an important one for me. And the last one is unsettled. Once we're discussing this and we find out about how maybe we might feel differently about what we're expecting, well, now what are we going to do? We have to come to some kind of an agreement, a mutual agreement now. Oh, we feel differently about this. What are we going to do going forward? What do we do going forward? So we take those four things of unconscious, unrealistic, unspoken, and unsettled, and we have to learn to remove the uns. This is the lesson for us, I think, that's really the highlight of expectations. Be conscious. We have to try. I have to try. Mike has to try. Be conscious. Think about, why do I feel this way? Why am I thinking that way? Is there a good source, a good reason? Where did this come from? Then challenge ourselves. Take the off realistic. Well, is it realistic to think he's going to fold that laundry, exactly the towels in 3, and then he's going to put them in the 3rd drawer, and then the socks are going to get like this and put over there? Is that realistic?
I'm doing better now, though.
Yeah, you're very good at that. But, you know, that can be a very big issue for a lot of perfectionist people. I can be that way sometimes. So we have to think, where did that come from? Is it really necessary? And is it a realistic thing to expect from someone? The unspoken, if you remove the un from that, now we go back to the Bill of Rights. We have the right to be heard, but what else did we say? We have the right to speak. Can't keep it up here floating around in our brain, or, oh, my heart is so full of all these things, and he should just be able to read everything that's in there. That's totally unrealistic. And if I've never said it to him, it's totally unfair. I have to use a voice to speak about my hopes and desires and talk about it. So the last one, once we get to that 3rd step of speaking about them, that's where the real work of compromise has to come in. That's where you're sitting down or you're getting out a piece of paper, you're really working on them. That takes time. You don't have answers to all the little expectations you have, and many times you get in a cycle and you'll get stuck. You'll repeat things that are bothering you and keep having those arguments until we can sit down and actually come to a decision that says, okay, how can we figure this out, and how can we agree to try this or this, and turn the expectation into a hope? Because you have to kind of end it at the end of that and just hope that maybe the next time around the other person's understood and it can be different. Anything that triggers for you guys?
Yeah, I think that, thinking about the expectations too was where, really figuring out what's truly important, and each person probably deciding, is it really that important that he folds the towels in this direction first and then does it another direction and then, or whatever. And I imagine that's probably a big part of it, right? Is each couple really looking at their expectations and really thinking, where does this rank on priority for me? Is this really that important, or can I just compromise? Can I really let go of some of that you should sort of thing? Does that sound fair?
It does, and this evolves. it morphs as we go through those 3 stages of marriage. And that's something maybe we should get into now to see how expectations work with those 3 stages. The first stage is the romantic stage. You know, we're dating, we're first married. I mean, we have high expectations. We are physically next to each other all the time. We're alone on a couch. I think we spend more time in the bedroom, and we really are having a great time. And then all of a sudden, you know, that honeymoon is over at some point. And I can't tell you exactly what that time is, but it happens. And then we do move into that second stage. And that there's sometimes that sinking feeling that maybe, is this person the right person for me? She does things an awful lot differently than I do things. And sometimes we feel rejected because we thought we were going to have a different response from Angie. I thought she was going to do things a little bit differently. And sometimes we feel cheated, we feel angry that this marriage isn't the way I thought it would be. And that causes problems together. She has her version, I've got my version, and we really begin to struggle in that disillusion stage. And then it can even go to another level, which is the misery stage. Misery is when you really don't want to be around that person. You know, the things that they do or don't do are just awful. And we start really thinking about, you know, where's the exit to this? How is this going to change? She should be doing it my way, and she's not doing it that way. And that's, again, where we have misconceived notions of what expectations really are. So then once we can learn to communicate, or we just settle for less. Sometimes we settle for less. And we get to this mature love stage. You say, you know what? This person's not perfect, but you know, we settle sometimes to say, okay, I still love her. But that's not good either, because we haven't really solved the problems. We're looking for solutions. And the solutions are where we can solve those problems and really start to change. And that change throughout all of our third option topics is self-change. I got to change me. She's got to change her. I've tried changing her. It doesn't work. That's where disillusionment came from. She's tried to change me so many times. And again, it does not work. So we have to work on ourselves to be able to make those things happen that we want to have occur in our marriage, so that we're able to communicate better and really understand where the other's coming from. And that's what our marriage is all about, understanding. If I understand her and she understands me, and we're confident that that is taking place, then we've achieved something really good. And that's what we're looking to do.
I think it's important to understand, I think this is common ground for all individuals in relationships, that unmet expectations feels like rejection. It's not rejection, it just feels like it. And I think that it makes us angry. And like Mike said earlier, it can lead us to the conclusion, which isn't truthful, that the other person doesn't love us. We're just not in love anymore. So it's a very important topic, because I think it's a source of great disappointment for a lot of people. So when we look at ourselves and we do an emotional check, we have an expectation and it leads to disappointment, and underneath the disappointment is hurt, and underneath the hurt is anger. And then deep down, well, they just don't love me. What am I doing here? I just want a divorce. So that's why I think we're making it sound exaggerated. It can be simple events. It can be things like, I can think back into our life. I think Mike expected I was going to cook. His mom, and that many moms of that generation, the husband came home from work and there was a meal on the table. Mm-hmm. So I know very much that, you know, he would go to work and he would like to have his meal on the table, and I would have a meal on the table. But as years went by, the early years, and I had 3 little kids and no car, no money, and he's working a 75-hour-a-week job. I don't know when he's coming home for dinner. There were probably nights where he expected to come home and find a nice dinner on the table, the house all picked up, and it wasn't. And also, I remember the very early years, we got married very young. He was used to going out with his friends. And if he worked at night and the guys were going to go out for a drink, well, let's go. He'd go out. And then a couple times he would forget to call me. And right away, that was my expectation was, I would expect my husband was going to just let me know I'm sitting home here with a couple kids and, what about my day? And you just think that it's okay to go with your friends and not come home. So those are things that they start with things like that if we don't talk about them and we don't share how we feel and resolve by saying, my hope would be, right? And try to turn it into a hopeful statement that the next time, could we agree? If you're going to go, you would give me a call. Or try to think if there was something from me that you would like that, if the house was a mess, when I come home, could we agree that you'll try to pick up the kids' toys, or I'll be able to get in the door and there won't be 3 laundry baskets and 10 pairs of shoes and whatever, that you'll try a little better so that when I come home, I don't have to be looking at all that. Or sometimes men just like some space when they come home. Can we just agree that maybe for a half hour, you'll let me go in another room and not tell me all of the things that went wrong today? Little things like that you're assuming the other person's going to want what you want, but
Right.
they don't think, they're not us.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that does bring us right. I mean, the answers to all of this are the 4 uns, getting rid of the uns, because if we then take the unconscious to conscious, we have to ask ourselves the question, well, what do we expect? And if the other person doesn't know what the expectation is, or we don't even know ourselves, we're open to all sorts of problems, but we need to really try to find out that together and work on that. And then unrealistic has to be realistic. I mean, am I going to be the knight in shining armor for everything that's out there? I don't know that I can meet that expectation. And those are the things that we have to work on together. So as we work down those maybe unspoken, if it's all up here or in here, I used to get very frustrated when Andrea would give me kind of looks like, you should know what I'm thinking about. Well, I really didn't have a clue. I'm just a dumb guy out there. What do I know? And until she speaks to me to let me know what that expectation is, again, we're going to go into the ditch. And, we have another topic down the road here that'll be coming, and that's speaking the truth in love. How do we say it? If we say it angrily or with judgment, a lot of sass, you think I want to take it pretty well? I don't think so. So those are the things. And then at the end, unsettled, we need to negotiate the areas that we do disagree.
Nobody's right or wrong.
No, they're not. It's sometimes preferences. So we have to say, I dreamed of doing this. Well, that's nice, but does that mean it's going to happen? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But if we can talk together as if we're on the same team, I think we're going to make a lot of progress in those areas.
Well, and I think
Go ahead, Sue.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say that I think that for a lot of people, I mean, this is my opinion. I don't know you can agree or not, but I think, and maybe it's in my case, I think pride, whether it's topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, or topic 15 or 14, that pride really prevents, I think, people from really talking about things and really trying to, help solve. And we look at the expectations and, sometimes pride, I think, prevents us from going to that person and saying, I really want to talk about this. I really want to talk about what I'm thinking and what I was expecting or whatever. And so if we look at the balance, you know, his expectations are on one end, her expectations are on the other. And then you try to get to that third option, which is it becomes back to that team mentality. What are our expectations that we both can agree on? So how do you get to a point where, you know, the relationship is already down in the dump, you know, or whatever? And how do people overcome those disappointments and those fears of rejection or feeling rejected? And I know we have to go back to looking at, do they go back and say, okay, let's look at the Bill of Rights. Let's talk about, I feel that we should do the laundry this way, or we need to do it every Saturday, or, and I hope that, how do we turn it into those hopes? What are we, when we're really, really down, when the relationship is really far gone?
Well, I think, first of all, it's not a right or wrong thing. It's individuals coming together. So you have to have that respect that somebody has the right to think a certain way. So it's getting both people together in the same place. It's a matter of having eye contact and conversation. And it's a process. It may not, you may not come to a mutual decision, met decision and agreed upon about a certain topic. It might take you several conversations. And I think the idea of balancing expectations is almost a process that we do every day, or at least regularly, because life is always changing and we're always having things to compromise on. They may be things that are pushed in from the outside into our lives that we have to make decisions about. So I think it's just important to keep the perspective that what I'm thinking and feeling is my thoughts. They're my thoughts and feelings, but I can't project them on Mike. I can share them with him, and he can share his with me. And we have to talk about, well, what do you think will work? What do you think would be a solution? If we can't come up with it, and I just want to say that so people don't get discouraged. Sometimes you're not going to come up with that solution in the first conversation. And so one or the other might have to say, you know what? I think I just need time. I've got to think about that. I'm going to think about your expectation, the way you're presenting this topic. And I'm going to think about whether or not I can move from my way of thinking towards the middle. Let's revisit this conversation. But I think what we're trying to say here is not, we want to discourage both of us from imposing so that it feels like someone is imposing their right as an expectation, and that's, the other person will resent that. That's not what we're.
Yes, and you know, it's something that we have to work on. And I like the words that you used, Sue. If we can change the word expectation into hopes, that just has a more positive ring to it. You know, when we can talk with each other to come up with mutually agreed upon hopes, that gives us the opportunity to be into the mature love stage. Okay, we're not in that mad stage where we're just going like this to each other. It means that we're really trying to listen to the other person and find out what's important to them. We mutually agree, and it can change from time to time what those hopes will be. And then we've made great progress in our relationship, in our communication. And we come into what we call the win-win situation. And if both of us are winners, our marriages are going to thrive. That's what we're hopeful for.
And I think Andrea was correct in really bringing up that point that, you know, this isn't okay, tonight we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about and hash out our expectations, and we're going to be done in 30 minutes and we're going to solve it. It is not that. It is that, you know, week after week, or, you know, revisiting it on occasions, and especially at the beginning of this process for a couple that's starting this process to kind of reconcile and work together to come to those third options. It is going back to topic one, oh yeah, I'm really not really respecting his right to, I don't know, privacy or whatever. And I haven't been using I statements. It's, it's a process. To not get discouraged. That the point I think that's really important for couples to really think about is that if you're both there and if you're both willing and you're trying and the effort is being put in, that's a win. I think that's a win, that you're both trying, and that's a good thing. Who knows what's going to happen down the road, but you're both there, and in that moment that should help take away some of that kind of I don't want to say resentment, but it should at least, help to feel better about the situation, that you're both willing to work at it. And it still is going to be a process, but the fact that you're both willing to look at topic one and look at topic three and really work on and do the homework during the week, that's a good thing. And that's a win right there. What I do want to do is I want to bring up the screens to share screen to talk about going on and talking about how we, if I can get to it, give me a second. We're still new at this. So if we kind of talk about those expectations and do a quick summary and takeaways, and like you were talking about, there's, unfulfilled expectations are often the core of a lot of marital disillusionment, you mentioned. So yeah, I really wanted this to happen for my birthday, or I really hoped that, but this didn't happen because we plan it all in our head and he didn't come through. But so I assume that's part of it, that unmet, we build these things up in our own mind and we haven't expressed to them, this is what I really would like.
It's true. I mean, another example I've got is, when we buy a lottery ticket, I mean, we don't really expect to win, do we? I mean, I'd love to say we do expect to win. And when we don't win, we're not going to get all angry. We're not going to really get that disillusioned. So that's one type of an expectation that we haven't really set ourselves up for that much failure. However, when we have expectations that don't come out the way we want, that's where we want to try to put them into hopes. Because by putting them into hopes, the word should goes away. We don't have that, it has to be my way anymore. That should, you should do that. It's like the blame and shame from the last lesson. If it's a hope, it's not a shoulda or you must. And that's one difference. And that's when we become more mature in our relationship, especially when it comes to the expectation period.
One thought that's come into mind, Randy and Sue, I don't know if you've read the book on 5 love languages, but if any of our listeners are looking for a good book to read about relationships, I think that's an area of expectations for people that would really be eye-opening. When you discover that 2 people can be in a marriage relationship and the way they would like to be loved, they can love each other, but they like to be loved in different ways. And that's an area that if you use the uns and you speak about it with each other, can open up a whole way of understanding. I'll give you an example. My love language, which is up to me to communicate to Mike, that I feel loved when he is helpful and he's around me and he does something thoughtful. And if it's a task I'm doing, he'll be thoughtful. Say, can I help you with that? Or would you like me to do that? Or just, spend time near me while I'm doing a task. I feel loved. Mike's love language that he tells me is he likes to hear me affirm and say to him complimentary statements and compliments about things he's done or attributes that he has or things about his personality that he feels loved and affirmed when I compliment him on decisions he's made or the way he's behaved. I don't share that same perspective and he doesn't share mine. So that's kind of like what we're saying. We come from these little spaces And you kind of think, well, isn't everybody like that? Isn't that what everybody needs to feel loved my way? And many times we try to give back to that other person. That's how we see ourselves loving them, the way we want to be loved.
Right.
So that's to me, a really good example of what we're talking about here. Sitting down with all types of things as they come into our lives and looking at them from each other's perspective and doing the work to communicate about them. And hopefully our goal towards the end of any of these exercises is to have understanding. If we really can get to a point of where we look at each other and say, well, I understand what you're saying now. I understand that. And going forward, let's set up our hope of what we'd like to see in our relationship.
And I think that's great because what you said, I think is so important that it does go back to self-responsibility. In topic 2, it was my responsibility or your responsibility to tell them what you need or what I need to feel loved. And that goes right back to that topic 2 and to topic 1, that we have the right to speak what we feel or what we think. And so the topics do interweave. And so there's a constant opportunity to go back and practice them all. And that love language book, yes, that is a great one. So that is, I remember you talking about that years ago as well. And if anybody watching, that is something worth looking into, because again, it comes down to recognizing yourself. And you can also, I'm sure, recognize other things about your spouse or partner while you read that book. So let's talk about, during this week, the questions that folks can ponder in relation to themselves in terms of these expectations.
Yeah, I like, Mike can maybe pick out one that speaks to him, but I really like this one in relation to our spouse. Am I willing to be flexible and negotiate on differences? I think that's a really big challenge. Are we going to be open-minded enough to be flexible to negotiate on something that we have a different opinion about?
You're right, Andrew. And the one that I like to look at too is that, do I know your expectations in certain topics? So, instead of me trying to mandate or to just push my agenda, we're always trying to sell ourselves. It's nice sometimes to be on the listening side. And I know that that's something that you like when I do. If I try to find out where yours are first, and I listen to you, I know that's going to go a long way to us getting to our expectation, because I just want to know where she's coming from, and then I can kind of introduce what I was thinking about. And that's where the stage is set for us to come together and make those expectations ours. One of the things that, over the years that has helped so many couples is the actual third option program that we have on DVD or streaming. And couples say, what can I do at home? How am I going to be able to, I listen to this, most of the time we would come, it would be a live audience. But now we've got people that are participating through this Facebook exercise that we have every Sunday evening. But if we really want to work on those, if we go to the website, thethirdoption.com, and download that streaming version, we just cut the price almost in half. It used to be $89. It's down to $49. We really wanted to help people, especially during this coronavirus really tough time that we have. It's a great opportunity for us to work in our relationship. We have the time right now. We're frustrated. We're worried. Are we going to have income? Are we going to be able to put groceries on the table? Are we going to be able to get back to our jobs? There's a lot of tension out there, and our kids in school and all that. If we go to that thirdoption.com and download that streaming version, immediately all of these topics will come up, and we can take each different topic, like expectations, and devote a day or a couple of days, just a few minutes each day, not a lot. It really can help when we go through all those topics. So many hundreds of couples have been helped with the third option program.
Yeah, and I think thank you for that reminder that yes, people can check out our website. And we are doing this every Sunday night. And if you're able to look at the video or stream it during the week, it's a nice reminder. It helps keep those ideas fresh in your head. Of course, these videos will be on our Facebook page to go back to and look at. And what's great is unfortunately, as we know, with this pandemic, we cannot all be together. And those third option programs that are around the country, they also cannot do it together right now. So some of those third option programs in various parts of the country are doing Zoom meetings where the participants, when they used to go to a particular brick and mortar building and they used to all sit in one room and all those couples would be together, which is a great, and I truly do believe that's the secret to the whole third option is just sitting with other couples, just couples just like you and me. And it's not a professional thing. It's not a counselor. It's just couples. And then everybody can really sit with and be like, oh yeah, I totally know. We've been through that, or we're going through that. I understand that. Oh, what worked for us. And so that's really great. Unfortunately, because of this, we can't do that, but there are some third option groups around the country, I believe, who are trying to do the Zoom so that they are setting it up. And as a matter of fact, tonight, I know in Utica, New York, that the third option program there is doing their first Zoom meeting. And you can find out about that program through the Good News Center. And so we're excited to hear how that meeting went. To kind of wrap up tonight, I do just want to take a look at a couple of quick exercises that people can do during the week in regards to this particular topic 3 of, and I like some of these. I kind of like the one, keep a list of the times that you get irritated or that I get irritated or or angry for 1 week.
Good one.
There's not enough paper. I think that's a great one because again, it really does. It puts it right out there. There's nothing like having it in black and white to really show, I think oftentimes. So another one is, next time think to yourself when something wasn't done the way you thought, well, what did I expect? Think that to yourself, or think about the fact of, boy, where did those expectations come from? Did it come from some beautiful romantic comedy movie that we grew up watching or whatever? Or did it come from my parents or watching my grandparents and trying to understand, why do I even think this way? And then thinking, is that really realistic? Suddenly, our lives don't suddenly just fade to sunset and everything's hunky dory. So, where do we get these? And a big one, I suppose, like you were talking about, getting rid of the words should and ought, which goes back to actually the blame game, I think, too. You should have, but going back and turning them into, well, I hope that next time, or I hope that maybe a few days out of the week, you could cook dinner. I don't know, or something like that, or maybe every Sunday. No, I'm kidding.
Great suggestions. So
yeah. Okay. So that is our program for this week. We're running a little bit long today, which is totally fine. We're happy to be here on Sunday night. We're happy to have Mike and Andrea with us, and happy to have Randy just hanging out here in the wings, just peeking over my shoulder. But
you see my strategy for coping, don't you?
So next week, we're going on to topic 4, which is, I don't even remember what topic 4 is right now, but
power struggle.
Power struggle. Yes. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. I think pride comes into that one a lot. But so that'll be next week at 7:00. Thank you for anybody joining us tonight. Again, the video will be on our Facebook page, and it will again show up in the events part. Mike and Andrea, thank you again. We'll see you guys next week, and thank you to everybody out there. We hope everybody is well and safe, and keep trying. Everybody's doing great.
It's great to be with you, at least by Facebook, and in a couple of weeks we'll be up there, so we'll be able to say hi in person.
Well, maybe not yet, Mike. Maybe not yet.
Social distancing.
All right, we'll see you.
Okay, have a great,
Good night,
have a great
guys.
week.